Okay, so this is the picture which actually explain more explicitly about type 1 and type 2 term. So you can see here, this is the carbonyl carbon of first amino acid, N amino acid. Okay, and this is number 2 amino acid, alpha carbon, NH and carbon. This is number 3 amino acids, and this is number 4. So N plus 3. Okay, hydrogen bonding is between N plus 3, and the difference between I'm sorry, मेरी लैब में से ग्लास पानी लेके okay, so hydrogen bonding between N plus 3, and the difference between type 1 and type 2 term is only the orientation of this peptide bond. Only this peptide bond between alpha 2 and alpha 3. Okay, and only the orientation is different. And you know the phi psi angle of this small ring. This is a ring, right? Ring ban gayi, right? So the phi psi angle of this ring is so that often this R3 is a glycine. This alpha 3 or R3 is the glycine, and because there is not much space of any other amino acid, and most of the time, and often R2 is also a glycine, but that's not necessary. But most of the time in type 2 terms, R3 are glycine because of the space. And these are the okay. These two terms are present usually when there is a beta sheet. Okay. So type 1 term usually appears in around single dot here, and type 2 terms are present here. Okay, another important topic is helical V. It's the alpha helices, right? And in alpha helix, for example, whatever the number of amino acids you have, so they are actually located around the circle, and the circle is 360 degree, and 3.6 in one third, right? So if you divide 360 degree with 3.6, you get 100 degree, right? And this 100 degree is actually the angle between the two residues in the alpha helix. So you can plot easily all the alpha helices. And you can see here, you know, this is the, for example, in this amino acid, with this leucine, phenylalanine, alanine, methionine, glycine, leucine, alanine. This green are which type of amino acids? Hydrophobic, non-polar amino acids. So, and only these two are polar amino acids. So you can see this alpha helices is mostly a non-polar amino. non-polar or hydrophobic alpha helix. And if you see example number 2, and these are plot, with a 100-degree with each other. Okay, and if you have number 2, then you can plot it around the helix, and you can see here that all the non-polar amino acids are on the same side, and the polar amino acids are on the other side, right? And this is the example of amphipathic alpha helix that has one side. You already know that the side chains are pointing outward, they are not inside, right? So whatever the residues are, their properties actually reflect in the properties of alpha helix. And if you see the third example, you can see here the most of the residues are polar residues. So this alpha helix is a polar helix. This is non-polar or hydrophobic. This is amphipathic. Half is polar and half is non-polar. But without drawing in the alpha helix, you cannot see looking at this. है ना, अगर आपके पास सिर्फ एक simple chain है, so you cannot predict if this one is non-polar or amphipathic. You need to draw in the helical being, okay? And then you can see easily these are amphipathic amino acids, amphipathic alpha helix, and this is the polar alpha helix. Okay, this is another example. You can see here, these are non-polar amino acids and these are polar amino acids. So this is an example of drawing the alpha helix in helical. Okay, you can see here an example. Okay, there are amphipathic alpha helix, this one, and you can see here hydrophobic residues are blue in color. They are pointing inward, and hydrophilic red in color are pointing outward. So this is the reason, they are often present on the surface of the protein. So the hydrophobic amino acids are pointing inside the core of the protein, and hydrophilic outside to maximize the hydrogen bonding and to make this helix more stable. Okay, another example is coiled. And now I want to play some videos. हमने ये वाली हेलिक्स की तो वीडियोस प्ले कर ली थी और टर्न्स की नहीं मैंने पहले 4 ही की नहीं हमने टर्न की पूरी नहीं की थी मगर वो जो स्मॉल पार्ट था ओके एंड
Previously, I mentioned that the interior of a protein is largely hydrophobic, meaning that there's almost no water to be found there. Water is a hydrogen bond donor and a hydrogen bond acceptor, and it would typically hydrogen bond with amide groups. In the absence of water, what happens is that one amide group on an amino acid residue on one portion of the chain hydrogen bonds with the amino acid of another. The carbonyl is a hydrogen bond acceptor, the NH is a hydrogen bond donor, and those two getting involved in a hydrogen bond. Now,
this is the one that you already know about the hydrogen bond.
the hydrogen bonds aren't random, but in fact there's patterns of hydrogen bonds that emerge, and these are the patterns of hydrogen bonds that we've come to recognize as secondary structure, like alpha helix and beta sheet. We're going to take a look at those patterns of hydrogen bonding or secondary structures in this particular webcast, and what you see in this cartoon is the picture of the alpha helix. Here we can look at the chain and identify alpha carbons. When we spot an alpha carbon, we can look to the atom on the left. In this case, we see it's an NH, and an atom on the right, it's the carbonyl. And so we note that the chain propagates in the direction N to C along the pathway where the helix spirals upward. Now, if you were to use your right hand and let your fingers curl around that chain, they'll travel in the same direction as your thumb, and so we know that this is a right-handed helix. If you try to do the same thing with your left hand, what's going to happen is your fingers are going to travel along the chain in one direction, and your thumb's going to be pointing in the opposite direction, so we know that this is not the left-handed helix. Now, by adjustments in phi and psi, remember that the amide carbon-nitrogen bond is rigid and planar and fixed, but adjustments of phi and psi allow us to position the carbonyl on one residue adjacent to or directly below the NH of a residue that's 4 residues away. And that allows for the hydrogen bond to set up and fix that secondary structure, the alpha helix, in place. We can see that there are multiple hydrogen bonds, and they're all parallel to one another along the backbone of that polypeptide alpha helix segment. It turns out that there's about 3.6 actually residues in one turn of the alpha helix. Also, a consequence of all of this structure, you can notice that each of the carbonyls are pointing in the same direction. Here they're all pointing up along that helix axis. They lie parallel to the helix axis. And so there's a dipole moment associated with each carbonyl. They all add together in the same way, and so that you can see that overall there's going to be a very large dipole moment that is going to travel parallel to the helix axis, and it's going to run from the N to the C direction. And so we can always remember that there's going to be, because of the additivity of these individual dipoles, a very large dipole moment associated with the alpha helix. I've made some models. You can try to make some models yourself, but what you'll notice is some of the hydrogen bonding interactions along the chain. So the adjacency of the NH and the carbonyl, as you can see here, allow for the hydrogen bond. And now if we spin this around, you can see different orientations of this. You can see different orientations that show that hydrogen bonding, and now you can imagine multiple hydrogen bonding that would help rigidify that structure. We can also look at what's more or less the typical cartoon representation of the alpha helix. And I've now shown you where the side chains are projecting. And so we see multiple side chains coming, basically radiating outward from that alpha helix. And so you can pick up, for example, there's lysine, and there's an arginine, there's a cysteine, there's probably an aspartate or a glutamate, and there's a leucine group. So you can see an alanine and a methionine. There's all kinds of side chains, and they basically radiate outward from the center of that alpha helix axis. In other words, the alpha helix provides this rigid scaffold which projects the side chains, orienting outward radially from that structure. The second type of secondary structure or hydrogen bonding pattern that emerges is that
Here I take a look in reasonable detail at one of the two main types of secondary structure found in proteins, resulting from the twisting of the polypeptide chain held together by intramolecular hydrogen bonds, the alpha helix. So there is one amino acid missing its OH off the COH, and it's just been joined there to a second amino acid that has had its H removed from the amino group. And I'm beginning to form this right-handed coil or helix. There's a third amino acid coming in. In each case, the amino acid will have lost a H off its NH2 and an OH off its COOH. Probably the most important thing to appreciate here is why it's adapting this twisted shape, and this is why. I've just produced there an intramolecular hydrogen bond between the C double bond O of one amino acid and the NH of an amino acid further along the same polypeptide chain. I put in another fourth amino acid unit, and so the coil is beginning to grow in length, this right-handed coil or alpha helix. And depending on which way you orientate your molecule, what you'll find is that the C double bond O's are directed either down or up, and then the NH's are directed in the opposite direction. In my case, you'll see that the C double bond O's are all directed downward, and the NH's are all directed upwards. And as the coil or the chain grows in length, these intramolecular hydrogen bonds will form. It won't wait until the entire polypeptide chain molecule has formed. Literally, as it forms, these intramolecular hydrogen bonds will naturally form. And this is why it's likely to adapt a twisted structure, in this case the alpha helical structure. And just in case you're wondering, this right-handed helix will turn to the right, whether it's viewed from one end or the other. Let me see if I can represent that. So, if you look at it, the arrows show that as you turn through the helix and work your way down, you're turning clockwise or turning to the right. So, let's invert that, turn that around, see how it would appear from the opposite end. And if you follow the arrows there, you'll see that the helix still turns to the right. So, a right-handed helix, the alpha helix. One of the main types of secondary structure found in proteins, twisting of the polypeptide chain held together as the result of intramolecular hydrogen bonds. Thanks for listening, and do please consider looking at others in the series, amino acids and proteins.
So now you have recorded about alpha-helices, and we'll play the video.
In a typical coiled coil, two alpha helices wrap around each other to form a stable structure. One side of each helix contains mostly aliphatic amino acids, such as leucines and valines, while the other side contains mostly polar residues. Helices containing distinct hydrophobic and polar sides are called amphipathic. In a coiled coil, two amphipathic helices are aligned, so their hydrophobic sides snuggle tightly together in the center, with their polar faces exposed to the solvent. A tripled coil is another stable structure formed by alpha helices. In this case, three amphipathic helices twist around the central axis. The hydrophobic sides of all three helices face the center of the coil, creating a stable hydrophobic core. Coiled coils are often found in elongated fibrous proteins. The fibrous nature of this protein is intimately related to its ability to form clots. A leucine zipper domain is comprised of two long, intertwined alpha helices. Hydrophobic side chains extend out from each helix into the space shared between them. Many of these hydrophobic side chains are leucines, giving this domain its name. A space-filling view reveals the tight packing of side chains between the leucine zipper helices, This makes the domain especially stable. Extensions of the two leucine zipper helices straddle the DNA major groove. Side chains from both helices extend into the groove to contact DNA bases. The specific interactions between side chains and bases are hydrogen bonds. In this example, an arginine residue makes two contacts with a guanine base.
After playing this video, I will go to the slides.
A leucine zipper domain is comprised of two long intertwined alpha helices. Hydrophobic side chains extend out from each helix into the space shared between them. Many of these hydrophobic side chains are leucines, giving this domain its name. A space-filling view reveals the tight packing of side chains between the leucine zipper helices. This makes the domain especially stable. Extensions of the two leucine zipper helices straddle the DNA major groove. A leucine zipper domain is comprised of two long intertwined alpha helices. Hydrophobic side chains extend out from each helix into the space shared between them. Many of these hydrophobic side chains are leucines, giving this domain its name. A space-filling view reveals the tight packing of homeodomains are found in many transcription regulatory proteins and mediate their binding to DNA. A single homeodomain consists of three overlapping alpha helices packed together by hydrophobic forces. Helix 2 and helix 3 comprise the DNA binding element, a helix-turn-helix motif. Amino acids in the recognition helix make important sequence-specific contacts with bases in the DNA major groove. Three side chains from the recognition helix form hydrogen bonds with bases in the DNA. A hydrogen bond is a strong, non-covalent interaction that forms when two neighboring electronegative atoms, like oxygen and nitrogen, share a single hydrogen. In addition to the contacts between the recognition helix and the bases in the DNA major groove, an arginine residue from a flexible loop of the protein contacts bases in the minor groove. Zinc finger domains are structural motifs used by a large class of DNA binding proteins. They use centrally coordinated zinc atoms as crucial structural elements. The zinc atom is coordinated by two cysteine residues from the beta sheet and two histidine residues from the alpha helix. A single zinc finger domain is only large enough to bind a few bases of DNA. Zinc fingers are often found in tandem repeats as part of a larger DNA binding region. The helical region of each zinc finger rests in the major groove of the DNA. Amino acid side chains project out from the helix and contact bases in the DNA. The identities of these side chains determine the precise DNA sequence recognized by each zinc finger. Assembling different zinc finger motifs allows precise control over the sequence specificity of the protein. The beta sheet is another common secondary structure. In contrast to an alpha helix, it is formed by hydrogen bonds between backbone atoms on adjacent regions of the peptide backbone, called beta strands. These interactions do not involve side chains. Thus, many different sequences can form a beta sheet. A beta sheet is a regular and rigid structure, often represented as a series of flattened arrows. Each arrow points towards the protein's C-terminus. In the example shown here, the two middle strands run parallel, that is, in the same direction, whereas the peripheral strands are anti-parallel. The amino acid side chains from each strand alternately extend above and below the sheet, thereby allowing each side to have distinct properties from the other. Beta sheets are usually twisted and not completely flat.
This is a cartoon representation of the structure of human protein mRAS, a member of an important family of small GTPases. For reference, the PDB entry for this structure is 1X, 1R. Now we will highlight a single beta strand as a cartoon ribbon with the backbone atoms as sticks and the side chain atoms as lines. Notice how the side chains stick out of the wide, flat sides of the ribbon, while the backbone amide hydrogen and carbonyl oxygen atoms stick out of the narrow edge. When we put this single strand in the context of a parallel beta sheet structure, we can highlight the hydrogen bonds stabilizing the sheet. These appear as dashed lines. In the parallel sheet topology, the hydrogen bonds may appear to zigzag a little because they are slightly out of plane. But two adjacent strands of the sheet are anti-parallel to each other, and when we examine their hydrogen bonding pattern, we may notice that the hydrogen bonds appear slightly more even and straight. In anti-parallel sheets, the hydrogen bonding pattern can be planar. Both parallel and anti-parallel sheets have the same number of hydrogen bonds per amino acid. This structure illustrates how a single beta sheet can have both parallel and anti-parallel portions. The strands of the sheet have an overall twist such that the entire sheet is shaped like a saddle, sitting between other alpha helical portions of the larger protein.
In the coil representation, we have seen that the coil are the alpha helices, and we know that alpha helices, if the individual alpha helix is very much unstable, but in the coil, when 2 or 3 alpha helices are come closer to each other, so they are really very much strong because they have a hydrophobic interactions. So they have a particular repeat. After a certain amino acid, there is a hydrophobic amino acid, which should be pointing inward. So these are actually haptid repeats. And if you consider these amino acids like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, with the non-polar residue, A and E are the non-polar residues. So in coils, the amino acids are in haptid repeat. Okay, with the non-polar amino acid, A and D are the non-polar amino acid, and E and G are the electrostatic interactions. So these amino acids are always fixed. And for example, you can see here this A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and we know that A and D are the non-polar amino acid, valine and leucine, and E and G are the polar amino acids or electrostatic interaction. But here it is not the polar amino acid, but lysine is a polar amino acid, with a charge residue. So in some cases, you can see that there are haptic repeat with non-polar interaction is very much because they are coming close to each other with a hydrophobic interaction. There is no hydrogen bond exist in between two alpha helices, but there is a hydrophobic interaction. So A and G should be some non-polar amino acids. This is an example again. You can see here, the helix are drawn in the form of helical wheel, and you can see much more easily that these are the hydrophobic interactions. And if there is an electrostatic interaction, you can see here, so E and G, if they are polar or charged residues, they should have some electrostatic interaction. But these are the main interaction forces which actually keep these coil together. And since they are repeat of leucine at every 7th residue, so that's why it is also called leucine zipper. And this is another representation. You can see here, these are the ionic interaction, and this is the major hydrophobic core. And these core are because of the presence of hydrophobic amino acids. So this is, if there are not only one, sometimes there are 4 alpha helices are come close to each other to form a 4-bundle helix. And in this way, these helix are amphipathic helix, in which the hydrophobic cores are pointing inward and electrostatic and hydrophobic are pointing outward. So these are the examples of 2 proteins, which is cytochrome B562 and human growth hormone, which are in 4-bundle helix. And these are, if there are 2 alpha helices that are forming a particular domain. So, for example, there should be some kind of angle between them. They are not always straight joining together. So, one example is hexokinase, in which you can see these 2 alpha helices are with 60 degrees with each other. And this is another example of with only 20 degrees. These alpha helices are with 20 degrees. So let's go through this writer. These coil that we have discussed, that they are haptic repeat with A, B, C, D, E, F, G with non-polar amino acid at position A and D, and electrostatic interaction between E and G. This isolated alpha helices are unstable in solution, but in the form of the coil, these interactions actually make them very much stable. The chains in the coils have a polypeptide chain in parallel and exact axial, and these maximize the so the polypeptide chain in the coil are almost aligned to each other. That actually make them more visible to form a coiled structure. And the coil is the protein motif that is often used to control oligomerization, which actually stop protein to oligomerize. and perform its certain function. They involve in a number of alpha helices bound around each other in highly organized manner, similar to the strands of the rope. So, collagen. This is again an example of a coiled coil. Okay, so collagen, we know that is one of the major protein in the connective tissues in all the vertebrates, about 25 to 35% of all protein. And there are again a particular multiple repeat which is lysine X and Y. So in collagen, this is the repeat which is actually happening again and again. While X is often a proline and Y is often hydroxyproline. So the proline is actually modified here. So these lysine residues are located along the central axis of the triple helix, and for each glycine, and you can see here, this is a proline. Proline cannot form hydrogen bond, and hydroxyproline definitely. So this also cannot form the hydrogen bond. So in this type of helix, this is not the kind of real helix, क्योंकि hydrogen bonding तो कम होती जाएगी ना इसके अंदर. This is only a glycine. There is only glycine which is present in this helix, which can form the hydrogen bond. So for each glycine XY triplet, one interaction of hydrogen bond forms between amide of glycine in one chain and carbonyl of residue X in the adjacent chain. So that is why, so they have the hydrogen bonding present in one of the glycine in one chain and carbonyl group of proline in the adjacent chain. And no intrachain hydrogen bond exists in collagen helix. And that is the reason. This is a kind of helix, but not the real helix. You know, in real helix, we can see there is a hydrogen bonding exists. But here you cannot see the hydrogen bonds which is present intrachain. So interchain, they are in between two chains there is a hydrogen bond present. And this is a multiple repeat of glycine, proline and hydroxyproline. So this is the example of triple helix in which you can see so there are sometimes lysines also present in this repeat, and they have a particular role in this molecule. Since the lysine are also post-translationally modified, and it forms the hydroxylysine, and the hydroxylysine is actually then can form a very stable covalent intramolecular cross-link between two strands of. This is a particular type of tropocollagen in which hydroxylysine is also present to form the intermolecular cross-link between the two strands, and via aldol condensation and dehydration. This slide is not so clear. I could bring some other slide that actually make the reaction clear. So next example is beta sheets, and we know that there are two types of, and definitely it has a particular hydrogen bonding pattern. They have a certain phi and psi angle, so that is why beta sheets are present in a particular region in the Ramachandran plot. So they are the particular regular secondary structural elements. So they are parallel beta sheets and anti-parallel beta sheets. And the difference is only on hydrogen bonding. These are anti-parallel starting from N to C and then C to N, then N to C and C to N. Okay, and the hydrogen bonding is present between two chains. Okay, not intramolecular, but interchain hydrogen bonding is present. These are the parallel beta sheet. You can see here starting from N, then C term N to C, N to C, N to C. And these are also interchain hydrogen bonding is present. And beta sheets are often, you can see sometime when you see the protein, so you may think that they are just a flat sheet. So never in the protein structure they are flat, they are always kind of twist. And such kind of twist is often present. And now you need to tell me, so this between 1 and this is 3, so between 1 and 3 this is parallel beta sheet, and between 3 and 2 this is also parallel, and 2 and 4 are anti-parallel, and 4 and 5 are anti-parallel. And when in the beta sheet, the side chain are either pointing upward or pointing downward. So the hydrogen bonding is present between the two chains, and these side chain projection is also very important. It makes the beta sheet hydrophilic, hydrophobic, similar like alpha helices, or amphipathic. So this is again an example of parallel beta sheet. Like here you can see this is hairpin loop, and we have seen that hairpin loop is present in sheet. But now we know that hairpin loops are present in quasi-parallel or anti-parallel. So hairpin loops are present in between anti-parallel beta sheets. Okay, and so sometimes beta sheets are very much highly twisted. And for example, a mixed beta sheet, you can see here, this is much more easier diagram to understand that this is anti-parallel beta sheet, okay, C to N and then N to C, and you can see the hydrogen bonding pattern. This is also the anti-parallel, then there is a parallel. So in one protein, you can see the parallel or anti-parallel, like mixed type of beta sheets. So these are parallel and then again anti-parallel beta sheets. So here you can see usually that you can observe the about 25 degree, about not exact, about 25 degree twist in between two strands of beta sheets, and that is why it made it very much twisted. That is why the reason they are not flat. So there is a certain angle which is present between the two strands of sheet. So here you can see there is a loop, and if there is example of connectivities, then you can see these are the parallel sheets, and starting from here, it goes here, and then there is a loop region which bring from again N to C terminal. Okay, so this is an example of parallel. While in antiparallel there is a helical loop present. Okay, here is an example of this is an example. Here you can see there are two kind of beta sheets present, right? And in this beta sheet, here you can see this red color are the polar residues, and the purple color are hydrophobic residues. That actually make the hydrophobic core of the protein, and inside and outside it formed the polar residue, which actually helps to stabilize beta sheet by forming hydrogen bonding. So these are different kind of, if the protein structure motifs is only composed of beta sheets, they are called beta barrels. Okay, and for example, you can see here, these are the beta sheets present which form a barrel. So these are different examples, different kinds of barrels that are often found. And here you can see which kind of proteins are associated with these barrels. Okay, so now in summary, in protein structure, about 30 to 35% are alpha helices, and the hydrogen bond is between carbonyl and NH group, and amine group within the strand 4th position apart. So NH and carbonyl has N plus 4 interaction, and there are 3.6 residues per turn. They are typically right-handed alpha helix, but there are some examples of left-handed alpha helices also. And this is the most abundant secondary structure. Actually, most of the proteins which are present in mammals are composed of alpha helix. And alpha helix formers, so these are the amino acids which are known to be alpha helix former. And beta sheets, about 20 to 25%. And the hydrogen bond between groups across the strand, it forms parallel and anti-parallel beta plated sheets. And amino acid less compact as compared to alpha helix. You can see the amino acids are much far apart, and there is a broad range of phi and psi angle. They are not very much compact. And residues alternate above and below the sheets. So we have seen the example here. You can see one residue is above and one residue is below the sheets. So this is not written here. And there are some residues which are known to be a beta sheet former. And coil, about 40 to 50%. Generally speaking, anything besides alpha helix sheets are beta turns, they are coiled. Okay, and beta turn, they are very short turns, and N plus 3, and the hydrogen bonding. So these are the amino acids which are known to be beta turn former, and loop region are exist between alpha helices and beta sheet. They are present on the surface, and they are not regular structure. Some polar residues can form a loop region. And tertiary structure. So these are the secondary structural motifs, secondary structural elements, and these secondary structure can form the tertiary structure, and then quaternary structures are also formed. Not all proteins form the quaternary structure. Some protein exist in the tertiary structure and they perform their function as a tertiary structure. So there are, we have already discussed about it, that tertiary structure are stabilized by non-covalent interaction, hydrophobic, hydrophilic interaction, electrostatic interaction, disulfide bridges, and different types of motifs and domains are present. And these are different domains that are found in the structures, and similar with the quaternary structures, they are more than one polypeptide chain or tertiary structure combined together to form the quaternary structure. They may be of the same type, they may be of different types of proteins as well. They form the quaternary structure. And so these are the examples. For example, here you can see that the protection channel. So this is kind of tetramer protein, right? And in which you can see the alpha helices are combined together. Here, this figure is taken from the top. Okay, that's why you can see like this. But if you can, ये इस तरह है, ठीक है? अगर आप इसको इस तरह देखेंगे तो आपको ये नीचे वाली फिगर नजर आएगी. ऊपर से देखेंगे इधर से तो टॉप नजर आएगा. So this is an example of the quaternary structures, and here you can also see different colors of proteins show different proteins. And so in quaternary structures also the similar type of interactions exist as in tertiary structures. I actually wanted to finish this basic so we can move further tomorrow in protein folding and some functional steps. Okay? So if you have, I was a little fast today, that's why I played all the videos first, so you will have some idea about it and you will have a little bit better understanding. If you have any question, please go ahead. Yes.
Those movement direction was opposite in video and the one which was presented in this.
So it doesn't matter. It depends on the अपोजिट कुछ नहीं होता इसके अंदर, क्योंकि आप प्रोटीन को रोटेट कर सकते हैं ना, मतलब फंक्शन इज नॉट स्टैटिक समवेयर, है ना, ये मूव कर रही है इन द सिस्टम, इट्स ऑलवेज मूविंग. सो डायरेक्शन इम्पॉर्टेंट है. आपको पता है कि कहाँ से कहाँ जा रहा है, यू नो वेयर इज द पॉजिटिव चार्ज, वेयर इज द नेगेटिव चार्ज. सो गोइंग अपवर्ड और डाउनवर्ड और राइट और लेफ्ट, इट डजंट मैटर, क्योंकि इस प्रोटीन स्टैटिक चीज नहीं है ना. इट्स इन द सिस्टम इज ऑलवेज मूविंग. हमारा सिस्टम जो है वो वाटर में है ना. सो दैट्स व्हाई द डायरेक्शन इज डिपेंड ओनली ऑन द चार्जेस, एंड यू नो द चार्जेस. ऐसा नहीं हो सकता कि वो मतलब अपोजिट इस तरह हो सकता, in a sense हो सकता है if one group is positive and negative and other is just be opposite, है ना, वो नहीं है. There is one direction. Okay. Okay. If you have any questions, please come to me in my lab. You can come anytime. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for watching. हाँ